I'll be back.
Dave, congratulations, you predicted a landslide. Now that you are in the door, what is your first priority?
I think the very, very first priority is obviously just to get one's kind of arms around where the club is at this point in time, because it is a very unusual situation where you've got a board en masse going out and some new ones coming in. Normally there's a process of transition, and I'm in the same position I think that both Paul and John are in, that much of what we know about the club and much of what we know very importantly about the financial affairs of the club have been gleaned from newspaper reports and some various releases from the existing board, which we've never regarded as being truly reliable. So it is going to be very, very important, given the fact that the club, I think, to use a term that Paul referred to, is pretty much broken. I mean, it's broken in many areas. There's footballing issues, there's infrastructural issues, there's scouting issues. I mean, really pretty much everything within the club has to be looked at. So it's very important that we get on top of that, I think, fairly quickly. So I think information gathering is going to be a big part of our immediate priority.
You've appointed Douglas Park onto the board. Can you confirm there's going to be any other appointments in the near future?
Yes, there will be other appointments. I think we've indicated previously that we think that it's very important that the fan groups, who have been, absolutely superb in the way they've marshalled resources over the last couple of weeks, and we think that should be recognised not only in terms of the support, but logically. It is important for a big football club like Rangers or any other club, I think, to have a fairly strong fan representation. So we want to work with the fans both in terms of getting representation on the board and continuing to make sure that they grow a meaningful stake and a meaningful voice in the future of the club.
Have you identified a chief executive?
Well, I think we're taking some time to look at the whole constitution of the board. I mean, you asked about priorities. I think one of the main priorities is just to stabilise the situation first of all, and actually we'll spend a bit of time today, and we're going to head up to Murray Park after this conference to meet the staff. The people who actually work here day in, day out, and they need a bit of TLC and a bit of leadership, which really hasn't been there for a number of years. So, in some ways, after the supporters, they're the next important group of people who serve the club. So, and as Dave said, we'll take some time to build the board out with a balance of skills, and we're going to take our time. This is not we're not involved in short-term fixes. We're going to take our time and actually do the right thing.
Can you outline why you have been so determined to take control here?
Yeah, I think it's quite simply the same as Paul and John. That, for someone that's grown up with a Rangers club and a Rangers tradition, that I always believe would always be there. I think I kind of picked it up from my father and turned from his father, and it concerned me that even though I'm not living in Scotland, but for all those who are here, you had a situation where that seemed to be breaking, and there was a real danger if this continued that you could end up with a kind of lost generation, because there is a time for fathers to take their sons to football matches, and it's 5, 6, 7 or 8, and if this thing continued, there could have been a whole bunch of kids never had the fun and the opportunity to go with their parents and develop the same love for this great club. So the focus really has been, and we discussed it earlier on, that it's very interesting that if you look at what we're trying to do in terms of taking the club forward, what we're actually trying to do in taking it forward is take it back. By taking it forward, we want it to get it back what we know it to be. We want Rangers to get back to being in its rightful place in Scottish football, and very importantly, we want Rangers to go back to the value system and the ethos that we grew up with, that is, I think, sadly disappeared over the last couple of years.
When do you expect the share suspension to be lifted?
As I understand it, technically, now that the meeting is over, it means that we can formally engage with the new Nomad, because that's something the club has to engage with. As much as I had pre-off-the-record discussions with a Nomad, that really was, kind of in the status of representing a board in waiting, but it was never possible to properly engage them. So we can only do that from today. And my indication from the Nomad is that if I confirm to them today, which I've just not had the chance yet, that we were successful, hopefully they'll know that already, that they will start formally engaging on Monday. And then the process, as I understand it, could run up to 4 weeks.
What would you say to those who have concerns about your past, specifically your tax convictions, and what that might mean for you being passed fit and proper?
I mean, this must be the 20th time I've answered that same question. Either I'm fit and proper or I'm not. I certainly wouldn't have engaged in this process and personally started reinvesting in the club if I didn't think I'd passed the fit and proper test. And I've had no serious discussion with Nomads or other financial services parties that indicated concern. The only concern I've ever heard coming out has come from the other side, who seem to find the need to flag this as a mechanism, I think, to try and deflect attention away from my objectives of the resolution. And quite frankly, I think that was just they had very limited real arguments as to why, in fact, there shouldn't be a change of control of the board. So, I think the media campaign was just to throw that out there, but I've not experienced that as being a serious issue in the financial marketplace at all.
I think you see today, Chris, you're looking at an 85% vote across the board. I mean, that's a pretty strong mandate from the shareholders in terms of the composition of the new board.
Just considering most of the shareholders are actually supporters now, and that's a huge statement to make. If you look at the supporters group, and you look at the shareholders, the private shareholders, massive amount of Rangers fans running the club now, and let's enjoy this moment. Let's not worry too much about some of the things you're firing here. Let's enjoy the moment. It's 4 years under siege, and here we are. Club's safe.
If I could just add one, what I think is just a common sense point, that given that so-called history, which quite frankly I think if one looks at the history and measure, a lot of it in fact does credit to me for my tenacity, and the fact is my settlement with authorities was very favourable to me. It wasn't damning to me at all. And if there was a concern, then a major city Nomad wouldn't even engage. When I phoned them and said I would like you to start talking to me in advance of this, they would have said quite frankly no, if they thought I was going to be a concern. So the fact they are engaging indicates in their mind that I'm not a blockage to them accepting the appointment.
What consideration have you given or provisions taken if you're not found fit and proper, either by the stock market or by the Scottish FA?
Well, if I'm not found fit and proper, then I won't sit on the board.
And that's just that you will still continue to invest?
I'll still invest, I'll still support it. I've got, I must have 40 companies back in South Africa that I control, and I don't sit on the board. So to me, being on the board is not critical. I don't think it will be an issue. But if it turned out to be an issue, it wouldn't make any difference to Rangers going forward. I would just operate and give input as a shareholder as opposed to a non-executive chairman.
Okay, so you wouldn't try to seek to influence power from your perspective because you wouldn't be on the board?
No, the issue is not about power. I mean, my position is no different from Paul or John's. I mean, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. It's not really about power, and I think maybe part of the problem over the last couple of years has been a confusion between what is right for the company versus what was right for individuals. And I think we're seeking to move away from that. So if for any reason a regulator came and said, Dave, we believe you're not fit and proper, and I had the proper opportunity to make representations and they still concluded that, then I would accept that.
Will Derek Lambias and Barry Leach be sacked today?
I wouldn't think so.
What would you have to
Do
say?
they have a future here?
I wouldn't think so.
What would you have to say about their conduct in office, Mr. Flynn?
Well, I think the thing that we find really disappointing, and obviously we've said that during the week. I mean, when you look at today's result, which Derek Lambias himself forecast 3 or 4 days ago, I think to be through a general meeting and the cost of that, and lawyers, Nomads, electronic voting devices, opening the stadium, the cost of that, it just seems a real waste of energy, time and money when you look at the result, which is on any basis very, very strong.
Would you expect Sports Direct to take up their option though, to propose 2 new directors to the board?
I think that would be quite challenging for them to do that. But I think it's important that we now look properly at the Sports Direct contracts. I think there are issues have been raised about the appropriateness and the quality of some of the negotiations, discussions and implementation of the agreements. But until we really look at it, I think it's very difficult to say what.
Do you have a message for Mike Ashley?
Not really for Mike Ashley, in the sense that I reached out to Mike Ashley a couple of times before, and at a shareholder level, Mike Ashley has chosen not to engage with me, which is fine. He's entitled to do that. But as far as Sports Direct is concerned, I'd certainly be encouraging them to come and work with the new board, because they are a partner. As I understand it, they want to continue to be a partner of the football club, and as I understand it, they view Rangers as being quite an important part of the development of their business. So in that spirit, given that the change has now happened, it certainly would be appropriate for them to constructively engage with the new board, and I'm sure the new board will constructively engage with them.
When will you appoint a manager?
Ask you, Dave, on a football front, when can we expect to see a new permanent manager, and have you had any discussions with any particular candidates?
No, I think you have to remember that there's only been 13 men in the history of the club who've held the position, so it's a really important position, and we see this as being we're laying the foundations for a long-term project here, and so getting the first team manager appointed is a critical decision, fundamental decision. So we're not going to rush into that. Now that this is over today, I'm sure people will approach us, and people have been approaching us, but until we get today out of the way, we didn't have any mandate or any authority to speak to anyone, so we will continue that process. We've obviously got a couple of people who are on the management front at the moment who have expressed their views in terms of the future. We'll have to sit down with obviously Ali and Kenny and obviously have that conversation. But the choice of the new manager, we're going to take some time and obviously get it right.
Sally was here today. Is there a place for him here? He wants it.
Well, there's always a place in terms of his status at the club. I mean, I think
in the management team.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to sit down with him and find out what his plans are.
Is there a place for the chairman of the football board at the moment? Or is there a future for him?
Well, I think we need to sit down again and speak to him. I mean, obviously, I think the result of the shareholders is very clear, our plans will move from there.
Dave, you spoke yesterday about having to spend north of £20 million in the short to medium term. Can you give me an idea of what proportion of that will be available to the new manager to achieve what you're trying to do, get back up to second place within a couple of years, you said?
It's still to say at the moment how much of that would go into the footballing side of it, because I've included some other development issues. I mean, so there's a whole scouting network. There's maintenance and buildings. But if you asked me to give you a rough figure, I'd certainly say it would have to be more than 50%.
And you mentioned 2 years to get back up to second place. Are you discounting this season from that, or are you talking about by the end of next season?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting 2 years. I would imagine within 1 year.
So promotion has to be achieved then this year?
It doesn't have to be this year. I mean, it's going to be challenging this year, so there's no point in wishing it's going to happen. There's a possibility it won't happen this year. We're hoping that with a full resumption of attendance and energy from the fans, that it might give the team a bit of a pick-up for the rest of the season. They'll be playing in front of pretty large attendances, I would imagine, from now on in. So, hopefully they can still get across the line this year. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But then in year two, I think with the the improved cash flow, with improved investment, Rangers, even if they're in the same league, should be investing in a squad that can take it up anyway for the following season. So I would expect, even without improvement, to see a huge improvement in the quality of what's on the playing field next season, no matter what league we're playing in.
Dave, there are some big personalities in your consortium, business personalities. Can you all get along? Because that has been a problem in the past, hasn't it?
We're doing quite well so far.
But it has been a problem in the past, hasn't it?
The past is the past. We've got fantastic people involved now, and just all Rangers fans, all well versed in business, great across the spectrum in terms of ability and skills. So there'll be absolutely no problem with it working together.
I think also the key thing is we've all got a common purpose. We've all spent a long time, trying to get the changes we thought were necessary for the club to move forward. Everyone in the group has got the same view as regards that common purpose. And what I always find in business, if you've got people who are on the same, aligned interests, they tend to get on. You'll always have disagreements, and that's actually healthy in business. And disagreements with the team, the manager, and so on. But that's healthy. But the most important thing to me is we have to rebuild this club brick by brick. We have to literally put it back together again, and actually in some ways not take short-term decisions just for the sake of it. We've got to build, build for the long term, and put in proper foundations. Now, we'll get some things wrong, we'll make mistakes. All we're really asking for is patience to do that, and I think we've got the support of certainly the main stakeholders to do that. So that's really the project.
Dave, will you move to Scotland?
Definitely not.
Why not?
We're actually moving to South Africa.
You don't intend moving here?
Not unless the weather changes substantially, and I don't think with global warming that's going to happen in my lifetime.
What now happens with the second tranche of the Sports Direct drawdown?
I've got no idea. I haven't seen the terms of it. I mean, if it is drawn down, I don't think that'd be a bad thing. It'd be very nice to go in there and find there's £5 million in the bank. I don't think it's likely to happen now. I think, and for it to happen, it's going to have through engagement with the board. So I think the fact that it didn't happen prior to 11 o'clock this morning, I would imagine makes the prospects a lot less likely.
But just to go back to the issue of the Nomad and the stock exchange, there's been a theory that ultimately Rangers might be delisted. How important is it that Rangers remain on the stock exchange from your point of view?
It's completely unimportant.
So you wouldn't rule it out?
No, I think that, for Rangers, in a perfect world, my personal preference, and I haven't necessarily discussed it with my colleagues, but I think for the rebuilding process of Rangers, my personal preference would for it to be not listed. But it is listed. And I'm going to say unfortunately it's listed. And there are shareholders who have been supportive of this change, who have been supportive of their acquisitions, who are in fact institutions who can only invest in public companies. And I think out of respect for them and for the support, it's very, very important that we keep the public listing. But from Rangers Football Club's point of view, it is completely unimportant.
Okay, what would be the advantages of it not being listed, Dave?
Well, I think the one can there's a cost advantage. You don't have all the costs one spends on listing, and but also a lot of the restructuring you can go ahead and do what you want with people you want to. You're not having a situation where if you think Douglas Park should come on the board, you put him on the board. You don't have to go to some chap in London who has to do an investigation and goes into something that happened 15 years ago. So you have these complications, and I think from an investment point of view as well, it would be a very hard sell, and I think today even Charles Green would struggle to go into the city and convince institutions that should be investing in Rangers, because clearly there's a rebuild programme. Clearly it requires investment. So if you're investing with other people's money, which none of us are doing, we're putting our own money, and if it's other people's money and you're doing that in a fiduciary responsibility, you require dividends, you require share price appreciation. We're not doing it for that. Do we think there's a good business case long term? Absolutely. From where Rangers are, it's pretty much at the bottom. There's not much room to go down. So there's a lot of upside, but it's going to take time, it's going to take patience. The cash flows will have to be reinvested back into the club. So it really is not an ideal sell to an institution from an investment perspective.
Douglas Park make a financial contribution now he's on the board, Mr. Keane?
I believe he has already. And my understanding is Douglas is extremely enthusiastic about getting involved, and certainly the earlier discussions that we had when we made if you remember, the offer of the £16 million 8 and 8, Douglas has always been enthusiastic about being party to that, and as I understand it, he'll continue to contribute going forward.
I think it's just great. Actually, I think we've all known Douglas for a long time, but to have someone of Douglas's calibre, on the board, I think from my personal point of view as a fellow board member is fantastic. I think to have that calibre of person and his energy and intellect is fantastic for the club.
On the managerial front, the status quo doesn't seem conducive to gaining promotion this season. So while Paul said you don't want to rush it because it's a difficult decision, by the same token, time wouldn't seem to be on your side if you do want to go up this season.
Look, I think this season it's too late, other than enthusiasm and energy, to give a completely different direction to the season. We are where we are, so I think the best we can hope is that this kind of tidal change today and the support of the fans somehow galvanises and we get through the season. But there's very little one can do to manage that differently other than to hope that kicks in. But my personal thought is that at this stage in Rangers Club's history and its development going forward, We need less of a manager, if I can use that term, and much more of a coach, because we're going to be bringing in players. We're not going to go out and buy a new team and then tell someone to come in and manage them. You're going to need someone with a different set of skills who's going to have to come in and build and develop and bring youngsters coming through. So it is a very, very important position. I think we have to just be very, very, very careful. It's a long road ahead, and I think it takes a different type of manager. It's not bringing a Dick Advocate and say we've got a team that's been winning the league and you just have to manage them. It's a very, very different role, and we've got to be very, very smart about the type of individual we get in now.
So
Okay,
can
thank
you
you.
see out the season though?
It's unfair, don't you?
I don't know. I don't know.
Have you had discussions with any other parties with regards to financial investment?
I mean, there's people out there. So the American has indicated, but it really, everything is subject to what happened today. And I think all discussions I've had with anyone has been, thanks very much, but let's talk when I'm in a position to talk. Okay. And that really has only happened from today.
Final show of solidarity, gents. Together.
Again.